Finance Minister Tito Mboweni's adjusted budget has come under scrutiny, with certain sectors calling for more clarity while others feel disillusioned by the plans that are aimed at saving an already struggling economy and trying to get it back on its feet. David Morobe, who is the Executive General Manager for Impact Investing at Business Partners, says the National Treasury must prioritize a number of interventions as part of the special adjustment budget if SMEs are to survive. Mr. Morobe joins us now on the line for a bit more on this. Thanks very much for your time, David, and welcome to the AM Report. And perhaps let's start there. I mean, you know, some people already pointing out how yesterday's budget was in the making for several years because mainly there hasn't been enough political will to make sure that we stave off the corruption that's been eating away at the public purse. To what extent do you agree with that sentiment?
Well, I think there are a number of factors that would have affected how the budget is being addressed, but I think the primary focus at the moment would be COVID-19, and for us as business partners, our primary focus is how small businesses are addressed in that budget because they are the backbone of our economy. So I think you would all agree that when economic activity came to a sudden halt as a result of the lockdown, small businesses suffered the most. Suddenly they had no income and they had no way of paying their employees and creditors. So for us as business partners, we're just looking what initiatives are being introduced to address the plight of these small businesses.
And are you happy with what came out yesterday insofar as that is concerned?
Well, there are a number of interventions that the minister alluded to that we think could have served to address these small businesses. For instance, what he alluded to was the measures by mainstream financiers and landlords to provide payment holidays as well as rent relief to their tenants, which are mostly small and medium enterprises, as well as the relaxing of the terms and conditions of the guarantee scheme, especially insofar as the turnover limits were concerned. And we think that will open up the net to accommodate a number of small businesses who will hopefully apply and be able to qualify for these funds. I think that is very important because if you think about it, the most important thing at the moment is for our small and medium enterprises to be kept alive, to stay in business during and post the COVID-19 pandemic.
You speak about a post-19 COVID-19 sort of scenario, and I wonder how confident you are that in fact we are creating an environment that's conducive for small businesses to survive after this nightmare is over. You know, many people also yesterday mentioning that there was a lack of detail, for lack of a better term, in the finance minister's plans. To what extent does that resonate with you?
Well, I guess at that level it's very difficult to get into a detail because you're dealing with mostly macroeconomic issues. But I think we want to see some of these benefits trickle down to the microeconomy, which is mostly small and medium enterprises. For me, what was pleasing is that the minister also mentioned that there's a close working relationship that has never been before with them, with the private sector, with labor, with the community. I think when there's such a crisis as we are facing with COVID-19, you need the unity of purpose that the minister alluded to. And I think for me, that is the way to address the challenges at hand. And instead of bickering about whether there's detail or not, let's see where the bigger picture is leading to, especially insofar as our small businesses are suffering in this whole thing.
Yeah, it's very interesting you say that because one of the other critiques was the fact that the minister didn't appear to have many solutions yesterday.
I'm thinking about, you know, the proposals that he tabled or that he mentioned that they presented to I think it was the National Council of Provinces about the 26 billion outright relief to taxpayers, as well as deferment of tax collection of approximately about 44 billion rands that will be given to our taxpayers, mostly small businesses. We think that would inject much needed liquidity into the economy. I think for us, all the initiatives that go towards saving small businesses invariably preserve jobs and they reduce the pressure on the fiscus. I think it's very difficult for us to demand that the minister must give a lot of detail. Yes, there are a few challenges that you have mentioned, even as you were speaking throughout the morning. The government debt as a percentage of GDP is a huge concern. Where it is at the moment and where it's projected to be in 2024, that's a huge challenge, as well as the targets that were set for the National Development Plan in reducing unemployment, you can see that we are going the opposite direction as opposed to reaching the targets that we wanted to reach by 2030. We were on 29%, 30% now in the first 3 months, and that's before COVID-19. So I think the huge concern for us is that what's going to happen to the high unemployment numbers that's going to flood the market. If these small businesses fail, even those little jobs that are preserved will disappear. So something needs to happen in terms of initiatives to address our small businesses.
And I wonder whether you have an idea of what that something is. You know, this is an issue that I guess many have been mulling over for quite some time in the country. Do you feel we're any step closer to finally figuring out how on earth we're going to solve this unemployment issue, which is by far possibly the Achilles heel of South Africa's economic recovery?
I think we should be very missionary in our zeal to address this challenge. I think the first would be to rescue these businesses, to help them recover and be able to revive them post-COVID-19. I think initiatives such as the payment holidays that you mentioned, the rental relief, that guarantee scheme, as I mentioned, the terms and conditions. What the guarantee scheme does, it provides a lever for small and medium enterprises to access lines of credit which will enable them to maintain or adapt their businesses. So I think for us, I think that's an important element that could happen. What we need also is to make sure that the development finance institutions come to bear where it's possible to provide some form of direct subsidies to our small and medium enterprises, but don't work only as government. Make sure that the private sector comes involved. As the Minister said, there's a close working relationship. We as business partners are always keen to manage funds for the benefit of these small businesses and would be very willing to address any challenges that are there in making sure that our small businesses are able to survive.
Yeah, and you know, often we look to the taxing system to try provide some kind of relief, to inject more revenue into the fiscus. Can you think of any possible, I guess, tax incentives that could be offered that could be streamlined in order to also assist small businesses in particular to be able to stay afloat?
You know, I think you mentioned earlier on that the challenge that we have is that we have a reducing revenue base and an increasing expenditure on the one element. So the best that we can do at the moment is request a leniency in terms of tax collection by deferring those collections to a later date when the economy has stabilized. I don't think you can wipe it off altogether. Ultimately, somebody has to pay for these debts that we are accumulating. He mentioned at the beginning that for every R1 that you spend, 21 cents goes towards debt servicing costs. So it's important, therefore, that we use a number of measures combined, but the private sector needs to come to the party, have matching principles that can be helped to sustain or maintain these businesses that are there, because unless the businesses are alive, the jobs will not be able to be preserved. The government cannot sustain people only through government grants. It's a huge pressure on the fiscus. I think we need to have businesses that are there to employ people. In average business employing about 15 to 20 people, the multiplier effect there has a lot of dependence relying on the survival of that business.
All right.